increase in that area too, if at all possible. And those two alone are about 90% of what our increase ask was. But I do want to touch on a couple of other areas. As Andre stated earlier, a lot can change from July to January. So the CCID courts, we are set to open later this month. I'll have more information about that at a later time. But in our current budget, it was unclear how to ask for money for CCID because they don't have their own budget, they don't have their own program. So we're hoping that that's something that can be added. The statute states that only all fines and fees collected go straight to Jackson. So this court will not be accepting any money for itself. So it'll have to be funded through the legislature. We were funded a little over $730,000 last year. We've spent over half already. So we would ask that the new yearly budget be approximately 1.5 million. We have 2 full-time judges.
Just for CCI, and on your sheet, where is that? Or is it on your sheet?
It's going to be a new ask. We're going to have to figure out how we can do a new ask. And I was going to get with Emily on that.
Okay.
And I can provide a new sheet of new ask if that's needed.
But that number you just said, 1.2, is that right?
1.5.
Is just for CCID increase?
Yes.
Okay.
Currently, we have 2 full-time judges, 1 clerk, 2 deputy clerks. We have not hired a court administrator. Our court clerk is going to serve dual roles in that.
Since the chairman just walked in, I will say this. One, with the increase, I personally have heard, and I think I've heard from other members, that the CCID, the expansion of the Capitol Police, is helping. There are citizens who are thrilled that this is happening. Now, the other side of the coin is you have to have a court system upon, which is what we're hearing. So I understand that what I'm hearing is the CCID court is about up and running. Thus, it requires these things. Thus, you're making a 1.6 million request. Am I accurate in all
Yes,
that?
sir. That is
So, not that anybody would think otherwise, but in terms of things working, it all seems like things are pointing to that happening.
Yes.
And it has, because Commissioner Tyndall was in here yesterday, made that statement to us specifically. This is, in my opinion, the other side of the coin. So,
And hopefully in the next 3 months, we'll be able to have firm data for you to look at once the court is up and running and we have.
okay. But you'll get that to Emily.
I will.
Okay.
Absolutely will. The next issue, I know that's weighs heavy on your mind, Chairman, is youth courts. So we were mandated last year to do a My Kids audit. That was an unfunded mandate. We have since released our RFPs. We hope to award a contract in the next couple of weeks, but we're going to need funding for that audit.
Is there, which, if I understand right, there's a deficit request. You have money from last year.
Yes, we have 2 sources of money. We have unspent youth court support funds of about $635,000. And that is leftover money from used to be, I think, 1.6, and now it's 2.5 that counties have not asked reimbursement for. So there is that money available if we're given permission to use that. We also have approximately $350,000 left from the intake project, but that has to be used specifically for intake, and we do have other ideas for that money. But yes, we do have $635,000 that could be used for the audit.
So what is I'm using this term loosely, deficit request to complete that audit or to do what you need to do?
I'm unable to answer that right now until we award the contract to see, and it'll be in phases because we'll have our audit, and that's just coming in and looking at what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, how can we make it better, and then whatever is decided from that audit will have to be discussed too
When
about
is that due? When's the response to that RFP?
to the RFP within the next week. So we should know something fairly soon.
Can you pay whatever you need to in this upcoming budget?
If we're given permission to use the unspent youth support fund, youth court support funds. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
With the intake that we are also focusing on, like I said, we do have that one time appropriated. I believe it was 650,000. We still have 350,000. We currently have 2 contract workers who are providing centralized My Kids training, not necessarily training, but on the intake process, they're studying our intake, where are courts that need help that we can provide more support. So we hope to continue that project. We would love to hire a new My Kids trainer. We're also in talks with DHS about transferring 28 pins from their current budget to AOC. And those 28 pins would be an additional intake worker placed in counties throughout the state.
So, okay, on that,
Mhm.
it's my understanding, not sure what the pins are at DHS, but to your point is they're willing to transfer those over to AOC
They are.
and y'all allocate those pins to this youth court division or for the purpose of overseeing the youth courts or in the training with.
In the training, in the intake process, that's what our goal is to be.
And I think it's important to note that this committee heard, or the Judd A committee heard with the report that came out on the youth courts, that sounded like every youth court judge said we need training on intake, and the My Kids the same thing. I mean, so that's what y'all are getting at, is that?
Yeah, that is correct.
So
And
that y'all would handle or oversee that training.
correct. And even before training, we really need uniformity in what intake is, who does intake, what is a unit, what is an intake person, who does clerical work, who provides clinical work. So it's,
And just to remind the committee, I think it was, in fact, it was last year that DHS director stood right there and had sent a letter out saying that DHS workers will no longer can be used for intake because apparently that was either violating law or just they weren't trained on that. That correct?
it is correct that he did send out a letter. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I don't want to get into the specifics of violating law.
So
but
so y'all are trying to get that. So that's where this is coming from, if I'm
correct.
right. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
And we're talking about the transfer occurring in the beginning of the fiscal year. And so we would also need funding for those pins. And we're looking at probably another $2 million to fund those 28 pins.
You need 28 for just to oversee the youth court?
We're looking at putting in areas around the state intake officers or into an intake unit. So
Oh,
people, there are, I think, approximately, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but a majority of the courts do not have intake personnel. They can't identify who their intake personnel is. And so
I'm
for,
sorry. Even though it's in the statute
yes, sir.
and even though that's the gatekeeper to youth courts
Yes, sir.
and they can't identify who's the intake people?
Yes, sir. So and that's where we want to come in and provide help, is to give that support to the youth courts, to give them intake personnel.
And so if I understand it, you're saying that those intake officers would be state employees overseen by AOC. That's why you're asking for these pins.
Yes, sir. Yeah, the ones coming from DHS, the transfer of those pins. Yes, sir.
And that's how much?
2 million. And again, that's an additional ask that we weren't aware of we would need. So I will get that to
Okay.
Emily as well.
Well, Yeah, there's gonna be legislation coming forward on the intake stuff, but, so we'll look at that. Okay,
Yes.
what's next? Oh, did you have a question on that?
Oh, okay. Let's see, Court of Appeals. We have been significantly underfunded in our Court of Appeals budget. So in speaking with finance, typically we have to move money around from our budgets because we have 6 budgets within, is that right? 6 within the Supreme Court office. And Court of Appeals has always come up a little short to the tune of $2 million. In the past, it's been easy, I should say, I guess, to move money from AOC. But as these new programs start growing, we fear that that's going to become a problem. So we would just ask that the Court of Appeals is fully funded. MEC is a self-sustaining program. They receive no money from the legislature. So we are going to hopefully request a statute change to increase their fee from $10 to $25, half of which stays with the county. That's something we're looking at doing. Court
Is
report.
that legislate? I haven't heard of that legislate. Are y'all getting that to us?
Yes, yes. And finally is court reporters. This probably is the most pressing issue in the judiciary, maybe even the state. I've had judges calling saying they've had to cancel court because they can't find a court reporter. I would ask, and again, I can get this legislation to y'all, is to increase their pay. They have not had a pay increase for 7 years. We are fighting on one front, not having the people enter programs to even become a court reporter, and on the other hand, competing with private companies who pay way more than our $245 a day or the $64,000 a year that they get. I also am in the works of setting up a study group on the possibility of doing automated court reporting, automated hearings, and then transcribed. I hate to do that because I don't want to replace human employment with the machine, but I don't know that we have any choice now with the significant lack of actual court reporters in the state.
Well, let's talk about that because help me understand, because you're talking about state positioned court reporters, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because there's also freelance. That's not what you're talking about.
No, sir.
And where are the state court reporters stationed, I guess, in the various trial courts?
Yes. They're state employees paid by the county. The county pays AOC to pay the court reporter. It's odd, but yes.
Well, okay. They're paid out of county funds?
Yes.
And so are y'all asking for an increase to be paid by state funds to them?
No, sir. We're simply asking that the statute allow for an increase in their salary because their salary is set by statute.
Okay. To be paid for by the county.
By the county.
Which if I'm thinking back 7 years or whatever, we
Yes.
went through that and the supervisors revolted. And there are places in this state who the court reporters don't get paid because the supervisors have chosen not to do that. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
So if we raise that statute, I don't know, I don't necessarily shy away from a fight, but okay, so that's what you're asking.
That's what I'm
about.
asking. If you would like to make them full state employees paid by AOC,
Well, that's a whole other discussion.
that is a whole other ball of wax and a whole other budget. So,
I think Chairman Hobson has a question.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
thanks, Kev. I'm going to go back further than 7 years, go back 10 or 12 years ago when the decision was made to not allow the court reporters in the trial courts. Back when I was a young attorney, that's what we frequently did, especially in the more rural counties, is you would use the court reporter if he or she was not tied up with the trial at the time.
Yes.
And you would ask them if they could take a deposition in a case for you. And as long as they were not in that case, there was no problem. And it seemed like that worked well. And I know a decision was made, I think by the court, 12 years ago, whenever it was, 15 years ago, to not allow them to do that. And there may have been some conflict issues, but I have heard discussion recently that as long as that court reporter is not involved in that case. In other words, if you got a chancery court reporter and this is a circuit court case, I don't see why there would be an issue with that chancery court reporter getting their court salary and then being allowed to freelance and pick up the money they used to make. Because this was never a problem until that happened. This became a problem after that happened. And I don't know if the courts looked at that. Mr. Chairman, I would like to look at that alternative. I know our numbers on court reporters are down,
Yes.
but as they're down too, you're going to be put in a, it's still difficult for people to get court reporters if you're a practicing attorney out there. And I think it's a win for everybody. If they're not going to have a conflict, why not let them go out as long as they're not tied up and take and freelance?
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's appropriate to say too much. I will say this because I spoke with the chief about that. And as it was, because I expressed some of that, and part of it was, as I understood it, that the intent of the rule change that was made was for good reason, because they uncovered some stuff. Okay. I think now we're seeing that what's happened, we're in this position. And so there was just a reason. I'm not saying you're wrong or anything. I'm saying that there was a reason they had for doing that
At the time.
and it's led to this. So I agree with that. And so us figuring, I think that makes sense, understanding why the court had to do what it had to do. Right?
Yes.
Did you have something on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I'm with both of you, with this issue particular. I think I've asked about this before, and I think it helps us not knowing all of the underlying whatever. But I would like for this to just, if you can tell me at some point, hey, we've seriously looked at this, these are the reasons, blah, 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 I'll accept that. But I think it's a part of a grander solution that we can have if we're allowing them within a set of rules and ramifications to be able to freelance. I think that solves some of our problem. It helps us out a whole lot, particularly with this profession, for lack of better terms, dying right before our eyes.
And I will let the committee know that that is something AOC is working on with the court to see if we can come to a better solution. Like you said, it's several fold, and hopefully maybe one of the solutions could be an increase in their pay and another could be freelancing. So we are working on that though.
It is it's a definite problem. But so the request y'all are making is to raise the raise the caps, or raise the salaries.
salary.
From what to what?
It's currently 64. We would, in not speaking with the Court Reporters Association, I would not recommend an amount right this second if I could possibly give.
I think they have a number in mind.
I think they do, and I don't want to,
Okay, but y'all.
misstate their number.
Okay, I understood.
Yes,
Okay, but that would be county funds
yes.
as it stands now. Okay,
And they are aware that the boards of supervisors do determine their salary. It's just, it can go up to a certain point.
Right.
Yes.
determine the court reporter's salary. Well,
Yes.
but I'm sorry. I mean, I got a call literally yesterday. And it was reported to me that the judge said, we're not going to do this because I don't have a court reporter.
Yes. I've had several of those calls.
So, okay. Anyway, thank you. Next one.
Those were my highlights I wanted to make. Any other questions? And I will get Emily an updated. I'll get with her on how best to do
Okay.
the updated ask.
Any questions? Any other questions?
I got a question or two. One, going right back to the court reporter thing. Has there been any thought of what do we do? And I'll be honest, I don't know all of like the inner workings, but I think who sets the county sets their salary, or who sets their salary?
The county, well, the judge
Judge.
can request, but it's up to the Board of Supervisors to pay that amount.
Right, so the judge, from my understanding, like if you're in a district or circuit or chancery district that has 6 or 7 counties, the judge would set it and then each county would pay their portion of whatever they're supposed to pay.
Correct.
Have we thought or given any thought to what happens or how can we, or is there any way? Because it's my understanding that some counties that just refuse to go along and some counties are paying their share of what the judges set the salary at. And other counties are just saying, screw you, we're gonna pay what we wanna pay. Is there any way we can fix that issue particularly?
I would welcome any help in that area.
All right, thank you. So I got a question about my kids. I
Okay.
think there was something on this, within this legislation. There was a report that's due before the audit or something like that. Was there in the My Kids legislation?
We conducted a survey of end users and judges, and that was provided. But no other official report has been, we're waiting on the audit.
Okay, but did you have anything from the surveys that were done or whatever that you can share?
92% of the end users loved My Kids.
Say what now?
92% of those, the 200 plus that took the survey, the main thing we learned from that is they liked My Kids. They did not want to get rid of My Kids.
Well,
So,
yeah, but people don't like change either.
Understand that.
And what I've also been heard is that it's good for maybe what it does and they like it, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff it doesn't do.
And that's what we're hoping that the audit will show us is,
Okay.
and we also, what came out of that survey is we have added what we call MEC My Kids. And that's now a function for attorneys to get on My Kids and actually file documents, just like you would in MEC, instead of going to the court to file it. So that was a big change that came out of the survey.
Okay. All right. We are going, thank you. The time is here. We're going to go to ethics real quick. Is ethics here? There. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Wait, we've got one more hearing before the floodgates open. No. Good morning. Ben, good morning. Five, 10, and
Budget house, Russell Street. Oh, I'm. You got it.
thank y'all for being flexible, but you're the last one, so we're
won't-
holding back the walls.
You say the best for last. We won't keep you long. As y'all know, the Ethics Commission is a very small agency. We do a lot with a little. There's a few points I want to hit from our budget request and then tell you about a couple of revisions. We're asking for salary realignment. I ask for that pretty much every year. We are not part of the state personnel system. We did not get the benefit of the SEC squared implementation. But SPB has always been kind enough to give us salary recommendations. And so that's what my request is based on every year. That may be somewhat aspirational, but it's, part of our, my role is to come over here and advocate for my coworkers. We're asking for an increase in our contract with our hearing officer. We enforce the Open Meetings Act and Public Records Act, and we have, we've had an increasing number of cases in the last few years and the complexity has increased. So our hearing officer is spending more and more time. We'd like to increase her contract. She's a very smart lawyer that we have a contract with. We're asking for $25,000 to pay to ITS for an online database for statements of economic interest. Y'all familiar with those? Elected officials have to file that with our office every year. we are not able to adequately enforce that law because we don't know who all the people are who are supposed to file. We know who did file last year, but we don't know who was supposed to file. Everybody sort of assumes there's a list, there's not. So we've been trying for a long time to create a database that will contain that list so that we can enforce the law. ITS gave us a quote last year. That's what this is based on. LBO has a copy of that quote. And then finally, we have recently moved. DFA's gutting the building we were in on North Street, and we moved to the IHL building, the Paul B. Johnson Jr. building. IHL, as y'all might know, is prohibited by statute from charging rent. They do charge a utility fee, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But because they don't charge rent, they don't pay for renovations. And I'm told the carpet in our suite is about 40 years old. When we moved in July, I went to Home Depot and bought a bottle of carpet glue. I meant to bring it with me today as a prop and glued down the carpet that was coming up. But we've gotten a quote on that, and we're asking for money for that. So
How
that's
much
what's
is
in it.
that?
Pardon me?
How much is that?
That's about $12,000. It's we got it from a contractor who does a lot of work for IHL in that building. We're told they'll probably be the lowest, so I feel comfortable going with that request. Carpet is not cheap, as I've learned. The memo I just handed out are the things that have changed since we submitted our request in August. As y'all probably know, health insurance premiums have gone up in January. I wish that was handled the way that rent used to be handled. When we paid rent to DFA, DFA would come and request it from the legislature, and we'd usually find out about it after it had been asked for. That's not the way health insurance premiums are working. Y'all might recall a couple of years ago, we got sort of caught out by that because nobody notified us that the premiums are going up until they went up, and we were on the verge of having a deficit. So this is a small amount for FY 2026. It's small in the grand scheme of things. We're asking for an additional $1,656 for that. Y'all may be wondering why I'm coming over here asking for pocket change. It's because we don't have that in our budget. We're a very small agency with a small budget. I think we lapsed $75 last year. That's the kind of tight operation we run. The next item is utilities. That's an even smaller item, but significant to us. My budget request was based on an estimate of what that utility payment would be to IHL. It was a little low. So it turns out we didn't get our first, it's billed quarterly, so we didn't get our first bill until after the request was submitted, asking for an extra $563 in contractual services for that. That's the details, the fascinating details that I wanted to come talk with y'all about, but I have a celebrity guest, or maybe I'm the guest of a celebrity today. Our chairman, Ben Stone, is here, and if it's okay with y'all, I would certainly I would certainly love to hear from him. I will tell y'all first that he is the longest serving ethics commission member in the entire United States. The lieutenant governor recognized him for that a couple of years ago for his long service, the institutional knowledge and the guidance he's provided, and he's been such a great mentor to me personally. I also want to introduce Ross Hammonds, who's our new assistant director. He's come to us from the Public Service Commission, where he was general counsel. He has been here less than a month, and he's already doing a great job. So I appreciate him being here today, too. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to our chairman.
That y'all, thank you. I'll be very short. I know that y'all need to get home and do it. We appreciate very much you allowing us to come here today. I've been on the Ethics Commission for a long time. I've been chairman for a number of years. And I'm just amazed at how Tom operates the Ethics Commission and how responsive. And I hope that you would agree with me on that, how responsive the Ethics Commission is to everyone that comes along. We not only do all the things that Tom had said, but on a day-to-day basis, we have Ross and Tom and others too from time to time answering the telephone, telling somebody, here's what we can be. We can't give you an opinion, but here's what it should be. So we think that we fill our own places. We're very short of people there, but we make up for it. and they work really hard. Ross is just a great new example for what we're doing and how we're able to serve the public. The only thing that I would ask you is that we had a study made in 2018 by the Personnel Board at 419. We have been trying to get salaries, and that's salaries across the board. Everyone has a designated thing. There are no secretaries, there are no that. Everyone has a designated place there. And all of our salaries are it's from the 2019 level. You've been kind enough to give us 2 or 3 increases, and we really appreciate that. But we're still $150,000 short on salaries for the 2019 study that was done. And that's across the board. It doesn't, Tom is 20,000 or something like that short, or maybe a little longer. Ross is short, but it goes all the way down to the people. And I'd like to make some progress, if we could, in paying these people for doing the job that they do. I just sit there and watch them and answer and get my $40 every month. But I see what they do. I spend a huge amount of time with Tom, especially, and also with Ross, and they are really hard workers, and they are justified in having some increase. And I would love for y'all to be able to see your way fit to fit us into the budget to give us some increase in salary.
Thank you.
Be glad to answer any questions or anything.
I don't think there's any questions, and we're up against our time, but
Sure. Thank y'all so much.
Tom brought in reinforcements so we wouldn't cut the budget or anything like that by having you here. I know that, so. But no, thank you, and we'll consider that
Okay.
request. And do you have the report he's talking about? Do we have that?
Yes. They
Okay, they have that. So we'll look into that, do that.
Thank you
So
very much.
thank y'all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. No, that's fine.
Yeah. Great to see you again.